We have found that people can replace that lawyer, right? You don't need that lawyer. You don't have to pay those exorbitant attorney's fees to get some of these things done. And so we're packaging that and making it available.
All right. So, Lawrence Blackmon, welcome to the You Are Lawyer podcast. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here. I'm doing well. It's Friday. Things are going good.
All right. So, Lawrence, I'm excited to speak to you, right? I heard about your company, LegalEase, which I cannot wait to get into. And then also, you are serving as a Mississippi House Representative right now, like right. Since 2024.
Yes.
Okay. So, where did that come from? Is that why you went to law school to eventually serve or what?
And this is going to sound funny and cliche, but I didn't have political ambitions at the time. I went to law school, honestly, because when I was in high school, I did mock trial. And for the first time, I felt like I was good at something, like I played sports and I was okay, but I wasn't on the varsity team, right? Not for any of the sports. And so, I was in school, but I wasn't a great student, you know what I mean? So academics wasn't necessarily my strong point. But I had a teacher, Miss Lenore Reed, rest in peace, Miss Reed. She passed away about a year or so ago. Very brilliant lady. And she told me one day when I got in trouble in her class that, I had two options. I could either go to detention or I could come back after school and participate on her mock trial team. And so I said, well, I'll do the mock trial team. And she put me on there and we did really well, and we excelled. We actually won a state championship. And people were telling me that I was really good. A little backstory, my father's also an attorney, a pretty well-known attorney in Mississippi. And so, people were comparing me to him. And that meant a lot to me at the time because when you have parents who are really successful and who have carved out their own lane, for me, it was kind of a struggle to see how I was going to measure up to this legacy that my dad was leaving. And at the time, before that, I really didn't have any clue what I was going to do, what I was going to be good at. And so that really set the stage for me to go on and become an attorney.
Okay. So I was on varsity softball when I was in high school because I went out for it as a senior and I had to be. Yeah. So no problems. I understand what you mean about like academics were okay, athletics, nah. So what was it about the mock trial team that you really enjoyed? Was it the arguing? Was it the preparing your counter argument? Was it the public speaking?
Well, I really did enjoy the public speaking. And, so one of the things that I actually did like when I was in high school, I liked theater, right? I didn't really want to pursue it, but I enjoyed the theater class because it gave me an opportunity to kind of just act out. I can just act however, and people enjoyed it. And so I always compare being a trial attorney to being an actor. Right? You're putting on a performance. This is the way that I look at it. And so I enjoyed the performance of it. I enjoyed, putting on that suit and putting on that face and going out and really acting for the jury, which, in my trial, the jury are your judges, but, just kind of going out and being able to put on a show. And so, you almost have to memorize a script, right? Because you have all of the facts and you have to put your argument together. And so, I really enjoyed that. And so I've actually carried that into my practice as a trial attorney. Every single trial that I have, I look at the courtroom like the stage, right? And everybody in the courtroom is the audience. And so I put on a face, and I go in there and I have to tell, some of my colleagues, sometimes I don't take anything that I do offensive, right? It's not that it's meant to be offensive. It's kind of like, it's an act. And I've had people who got to take stuff too serious. I'm like, hey, chill,
Right. I'm wearing my attorney hat right now. This is my trial attorney hat. This is what I need to do.
Attorney hat, and I come to win. It's a mental thing too. Especially with your opposing counsel, and so I'm always trying to kind of get in their head and make them feel as if they don't know where I might come from. They don't know what I might pull, and so I've gotten a lot of rave reviews, and I've had some judges who have been pretty ticked off with me, but my clients are happy at the end of the day, and that's what I'm there to serve. So
yeah. And I will say, I appreciate you saying that about the theater and the theatrical element to it, because it takes a lot of work to sound natural.
Yes.
Right? I know you probably look like you just stood up and started speaking, but you've been preparing for weeks and weeks and weeks. Mm-hmm. And you have to get to that point where you can completely say it without even reviewing your notes. That is when you're actually ready. And I think that preparation actually removes a lot of the nerves and the fear of it, because you're like, there's no way I could get it wrong. I've literally memorized it, right? But people, either they underestimate that part or they don't want to hear that part. They're like, no, he's a natural. I am a natural after the last 3 weeks of prep.
I'm a natural actor. I mean, that's what I am. And I have a whole process that I go through to kind of get myself into a zone, right, where it can be believable. I kind of want to bring my emotions to the surface, right? And so right below my calm exterior are emotions that I have worked to kind of drum up. I use certain music that I know will make me emotional. I like to listen to big performance. All Patty's performances are real big, right? But so I'll listen to that, and how big that performance is and how much they have to kind of go through to make themselves be able to get in a booth and take it there. And so I kind of carry that with me. I listen to a lot of Kanye West and just people who I know are real genuine performers. I use them for motivation when I'm getting ready for a trial. So I'll be sitting in the car and I'll be tearing up because I'm listening to all this sad music to make myself emotional. And people are like, what's wrong? And I'm like, no, everything is right. Leave me alone.
I'm getting into character.
That's right.
Yeah, I love it. So did you ever do theater, junior theater, anything like that?
Theater was a requirement when I was in high school. I mean, I had a really good theater teacher. Shout out to Miss Anglais, but she was very eccentric. And I went to a boarding school in Mississippi. It's the oldest African-American boarding school in the nation. And it was just really hard for us to get a play done because everybody would just be acting, really like kind of cutting up in class. And so I did enjoy that, although I never actually got on the stage and did a play. We may have done something for like a grade or whatever, but no, I never did it, but I probably could have.
Well, I think it's fascinating that you didn't actually get on stage for that, but then you had the mock trial experience and it kind of, that fostered that love for you. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. So this is a very, very interesting background. What led you to law school?
Mock trial. I mean, once I had that experience with mock trial, I never again had a question about what it was that I was going to do with my life. I knew then that I was going to go to law school and then I was going to be an attorney, a trial attorney specifically. So that really put the wind at my back and it gave me a lot of clarity. It shows, the value of just one good teacher, how much of an impact on a life, one good teacher could have. Miss Reed saw something in me and she put me on that team and I excelled in that. And now as a result, I'm out here doing what I like to think is the Lord's work.
Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of a different question. Did you grow up wanting to be an attorney because your father was, or were you thinking you would do the opposite?
No, I wanted to do anything but that. Because I wanted to have kind of my own identity. And so, like I said, my father was an attorney. He was in the Mississippi House of Representatives. And so he was a very well-known figure in Mississippi now, but especially way back then. And so I felt like I really couldn't escape that shadow, right, of having this huge parent. So everywhere I went, it's people wouldn't even introduce me by name. People would say, do you know who this is? This is Ed's son. And so that was kind of like who I was. And so I really kind of struggled to figure out what my identity was going to be in life. And so I actually wanted to be a veterinarian. We had a farm at the boarding school. And so I worked on a farm. I was in the 4-H club. I was in FFA. I would do the livestock shows at the county fair. I'd show sheep. I've showed pigs. So beef cattle, I was really into that. And I was thinking that was the direction that I was going to take my life in. But for that experience as a senior in high school, I probably would have been a veterinarian. That and also, so around the same time when I was doing my trial, I had a mentor who was a veterinarian. And I told him that I was kind of starting to think about going to law school. And he said, well, what's important to you? And so I told him a few things. And I also told him that money was important to me. And he said, well, if money is important to you, be a lawyer. And so that was kind of, prophetic. So the combination of those things kind of set me on the path to law school.
All right. So I got to say, Lawrence, I have questions prepared and you are catching me off guard. I'm like, veterinarian. Thankfully, because you are a public figure, I was able to watch a couple interviews and stuff. Mm-hmm. You guys are getting the background scoop on a lot right here in this episode.
Yeah. And I try to do that with any podcast or any interview. I want to give you something, give your audience something that I haven't shared before. So actually, this is a lot of firsts that have come out here. Shout out to you and shout out to your audience.
Absolutely. Okay. So I would love to dive into your work in the Mississippi House of Representatives, but I also really want to talk about this company that you're working with. You're the CEO of a company. I feel like there's going to be a lot of surprises in where that came from. So let's go there. What's it like being a CEO?
So, I enjoy it. I have a really good team. I have a really good co-founder, a really good chief of staff, and a really good CTO that's a chief technology officer. And so, they make it easy. But, I really enjoy it. Every day is something different. And, it's kind of like you're building something, you're molding something, right? Because I'm a CEO, not of an established company, but of a startup, right? And so I like getting up every day and working towards, building something, not like, building a building where you could actually see your progress in the physical form, right? You just kind of have to use other metrics, other key performance indicators, they call them, to know that what you're doing is working. And so I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. So what is the name of the company and how long has it existed?
So the company is LegalEase, right? LegalEase. We make legal easy. And we started this company back in 2023, myself and my co-founder, Roger Roman. At first, we didn't think that it was going to grow the way that it has. We kind of were like, well, I did. I'll be honest. I did. I knew that this could be big. But we have been pleasantly surprised at the rate that it's been adopted by people all across the nation and the response from investors. In fact, we just won a pitch competition last week in Mississippi that was sponsored by Regions Bank and Innovate Mississippi. So people are really receptive to what it is that we're working on.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Regions Bank. I went to law school in Louisiana. I went to Southern. And so Regions was one of the big banks there. I'm in Ohio now, which is where I'm from.
Okay.
But yeah, shout out to Regions. Okay, so how do you make legal easy for people? Is it young legal professionals, all legal professionals? What?
Yeah, so this is actually a consumer-facing legal technology company. And what we do is take existing technology, primarily artificial intelligence, and we use it to build platforms that empower people to handle what we call non-complex legal matters without an attorney. That would be things like expungements, no-fault divorce, soft tissue, personal injury cases, things that people traditionally would go to a lawyer for, that would pay, say, an arm and a leg, right? For legal services. And with the advent or the acceleration of this new technology, we have found that people can replace that lawyer, right? You don't need that lawyer. You don't have to pay those exorbitant attorney's fees to get some of these things done. And so we're packaging that and making it available to the public as an option, to not have to go to an attorney and sit in a lawyer's office and schedule an appointment and call for updates. That's the old way of doing things, is the way that we see it. As technology has advanced and become more ubiquitous, we feel like that the public is ripe for adopting this type of platform that we've built. And I think that people are glad, right, in certain respects, to not have to go to a lawyer for some of these things. And so we're just making that possible.
Yeah. So if you are listening to the podcast and you're like, I don't understand why lawyers are so expensive anyway, let's use divorce as an example, because that was one you gave for LegalEase services. If I came to you and was like, hey, I want to get a divorce, I got to ask you questions and we got to go through how long have you been married? And what about this? What assets do you have? What about this? Then you're actually paying for my time to sit here and review your facts. Mm-hmm. What about this? What about that? That's the part you're paying for. You're paying for the lawyer's mind. Mm-hmm. And I think it's fascinating that LegalEase services very specific things that are a little more cut and dry, right? Like you said, a non-contest divorce, not one where you got children and millions of dollars in assets, things like that. Mm-hmm. Soft tissue injuries, not you T-boned a 16-wheeler.
Right.
Those are where it's complicated, mm-hmm. and you really have to pay for that lawyer's brain. So I think that makes sense. Even in the strategy of you saying there are a couple things that are a little bit more checklist, those are the things that will service.
You said the right thing. Things that are where a lawyer would have you come in and sit down and they would just go through the questions, check off things. And as lawyers, we know after we ask certain questions, 90% of the time, know what direction this is going to go in and how it's going to play out. And so, the technology now is so advanced, right, that can be done without an attorney, right? And so that's exactly what we've done. We've built those checklists into our process. Our AI-powered legal assistant, Wilma, will ask you those same questions that a lawyer would ask, and then she'll come to much of those same conclusions that a lawyer would come to guide you through the process.
Yes. Okay, very cool. So 2 questions for you. Mm-hmm. The last 2 questions. First one, you started LegalEase in 2023. You ran for Mississippi House of Representatives 2024. You were busy.
I was very busy.
Why this timeline? Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. It just kind of happened like that. Initially, I was not going to run, I'll be honest. My father was in the Mississippi House of Representatives for a long time, and he had been doing it for about probably 40 years. And he was wanting to get out of politics and kind of slow down and enjoy life some. And so he asked me if I were interested in running. And initially I said no. And so he was going to run again. And I told him after some discussions with my friends, and they were like, you should do it. You might be really good in politics. And so, I decided at the last minute that, what, I think I will run. And so I went and I registered to run. And initially it was almost as if we were going to be running against each other. But I convinced him to go ahead and withdraw from the race. And so he did. Fortunately for me, with all that I had going on, nobody else registered to run, right? And so I did not have an opponent in the race. And so that, alleviated some of the pressure. I was able to, run the campaign and also get the startup off the ground. And so, I don't expect that will be the case in my next election. I'm fully ready. Whoever's coming, if they think they want some, bring it on. But, that's how I got my start in politics.
Yeah. Okay. And so my last question here, Lawrence, what would you say to a young lawyer, 5 years practicing or less, or a law student about what they could do with their law degree?
Think outside of the box. Think outside of the box. That law degree is useful. The experience of going to law school and the way that you're taught to digest information, ask questions, and figure things out. The way we learn to do research, that can be applied in the courtroom, but it can also be applied outside of the courtroom in so many other areas. And so, don't limit yourself by what people think of as traditional roles and jobs for attorneys are. Anything is possible, right? If you could make it through law school, then you could make it through anything. And so think outside of the box, look for opportunities within the law. But, if things are not working out and you're not finding the right opportunities for yourself in the legal space, look outside of the legal space. People are always glad to have legal minds on board, right, and involved with their companies. And if nothing else, you can start your own company, right? You can look at what's going on in your community, look at what the needs are in your community, and then you can serve them, because people generally, I think that people trust lawyers, right? People believe that lawyers can fix things, can do things that other people can't do. And so that's kind of a superpower that we have, whether you're practicing in a firm or not. And so don't be afraid to go out and use that and to explore and see how you can be useful in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. Because your legal education, your legal knowledge will transfer with you everywhere, right, to the Mississippi House of Representatives, to being a CEO, to possibly being a veterinarian. Like, I feel like with you probably are still going to do a lot of other surprising things.
I sure hope so. I sure hope so. Like I told you that in my final form, I'll be Larry, but Larry will be a rancher, right? So in my final form, I would like to be a cattle rancher. So we'll see.
See, I knew it. I could just tell. Well, thank you so much, Lawrence Blackmon. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing with the audience. Thank you.
I really appreciate you for having me. Let's do it again anytime.
Absolutely. Bye.
Peace.